Hi guys, this is a quick video, a response video for the Angry Photographer's video on the Fuji Fax X prices and GFX prices. So in this video, he's basically comparing the Fujifilm X system with a bunch of things, mainly Sony, let's face it here, mainly Sony. And he's doing both the X system and the GFX system, and he just goes on to say that they are better value. So let's have a look at what he actually said. I've done my own thing, so it's a little bit more clear. So these are the lenses that he went for. This is the camera, and this is the Sony a7R III with its lenses. And when you look at the price difference, that's gigantic. That's a $7,440 difference. However, let's just break this down just a little bit. First of all, the cameras. Sony a7R III and Fuji X-T3. So Fujifilm X-T3 is 26 megapixel. The Sony a7R III is 42. It's almost double the resolution of the X-T3. In addition, it has image stabilization, much better eye autofocus, pixel shift. So it's generally a much more professional, and of course, you know, it's full frame as well, so you get like not only the image stabilization, which gives you about maybe 4 stops if you're lucky, if you're quite steady, but also the full frame sensor will probably have about a 1-stop advantage over the APS-C sensor of the X-T3. So you get a much more polished professional product by going this route. However, you do pay $7,440 more. The 24mm 1.4 G Master is a very, very good lens. It's compact, it's sharp, and it's being heralded as amazing. This one as well, I have this this lens, really good, really good. And as you can see, it's like double the price of the Fujifilm right there. This one is the sharpest lens that Lens Rental has ever tested, you know, bar none. And interestingly, the 90mm f2.8 macro, under DxOMark, this has actually managed to resolve 42 megapixels out of 42 megapixels. So actually, down here, this crop of lenses that you have here are better than that, right? However, like I said, you do pay $7,440 extra. Okay, you can even extend this a little bit more if you take into account the weight. So the weights are here and over here, the outer columns. And as you can see, this is 6,626 grams, 6.6 kilos, and this is 8.8 kilos. So that's quite interesting. However, I think it's a little bit unfair to go for this Sony a7R III. It's not really the same type of camera, and that's reflected in the price. So rather than compare the a7R III, it's better to compare the Sony a7 III. It's you know, this one's 26 megapixels, this one's 24, but you get a full frame sensor. So there's advantages, well, for either one, depending on what you want to do. However, what I've done here is I've worked out the field of view equivalence. So what you do, because this has got a 1.5 times crop, you multiply the focal length and the aperture by 1.4, and you get what you'd have like the equivalent of the 35mm. And what I've done over here is I've picked lenses which are the equivalent of these. Okay, now this isn't what Mr. Angry did, Mr. Ken Wheeler, but I've decided to go for this because you get a more accurate kind of a comparison. So the G Master, that was actually the 24mm G Master, was a good comparison, and as you can see, price wise, yes, it's more expensive. The next one, the 35mm 1.4, has this equivalence, and the closest that we have on the Sony side is the 50mm 1.8, which comes in at $223, considerably cheaper than the $599. Okay, let's have a look at the next one, the 56mm 1.2. That's coming in at $999. This is the equivalence, and the Sony equivalent 85mm f1.8 is coming in at $573, which is a lot cheaper than that. Next, okay, this is a macro lens. The only macro lens Sony have right now is the 90mm. So although you got this field of view equivalent, it's going to be a little bit different, of course, because we don't have a 120mm macro, we've got 90. So this will have to do. And price-wise, it's cheaper. There's not that much in it, as about the same. Okay, now here the 90mm f2, that's the equivalent of 135mm f3. Now Sony don't have f3 lenses. We got an f1.8 G Master lens, which Lens Rental said was the sharpest lens that they have ever tested. Of course, the price is double, but you get what you pay for, so that's fair enough. Next, we have a whole bunch of zoom lenses. So first of all, rather than putting the G Master ones up, let's use the f4, because these are all f4.2. And, it's cheaper. 1,648 is cheaper than that one. The Sony here is $1 cheaper than the Fujifilm, and the 70-200, that's a little bit cheaper than that. And as you can see, overall you got $12,649 versus $12,940. Now there is one caveat here. This lens here, 100 to 400, that's the equivalent to 150 to 600. Sony don't have one of those yet. However, the Sony system, when it was first introduced, one of the things was that you should be able to adapt any lens, whether it was Nikon, whether it was Canon, whatever. That was one of their selling points, because at the time they only had 2 lenses. And therefore, like, a lot of the people just use their Canon lenses and their Nikon ones. Well, here I put the Tamron 150 to 600, but I've also added the Sony LAEA3 adapter for this. There are some advantages. You get a bigger aperture here, so you get like better low light performance. However, it isn't native, so there's that. Okay, but look at the price. The full frame is actually cheaper. And not only that, it's only a little bit more heavy. And a bunch of lenses here, all these green ones here, are lighter than the APS-C equivalent. What's going on there? That's a bit weird, isn't it? But hold on a second, I'm not done yet, because there's a little bit of choice in the Sony realm. You don't have to get a 24 to 105, because between this and this there's a little bit of overlap, because so you could actually, instead of going for the 24 to 105 f4, you could in fact go for the 24 to 70 f4, and you'll still have this focal length as well, and there wouldn't be any overlap. So let's do that. And here, this one is actually even cheaper than the 24 to 105 f4, so that's 1,198. This is $798, taking that difference to 12,249. Now if you look at the difference, 12,940 minus 12,249, that's a $691 advantage to the Sony, and you get a full frame sensor, and you get the sharpest lens known to man, and you get this awesome macro lens which resolves literally every single pixel. It's a no-brainer. If you've got this much money to spend, get full frame. Okay, but it gets even better, because suppose you didn't want to buy all of these lenses. I mean, this is a lot of money to put down on a camera system, and for a lot of us, we're just hobbyists, let's face it. Okay, you might not even want to get 2 separate zoom lenses for this particular focal range. You could get the 24 to 240 millimeter f3.5 to 6.3. Granted, it's not going to have the low light capability of this one or even the G Master, but for a holiday lens, for outdoor use, this is bloody good. f3.5 to 6.3 is good for outdoor use, you know, and that way you save yourself on buying an extra lens. And look at the price, $11,001 versus $12,940. You know, if I was on a budget, I know which one I would go for, and it wouldn't be the Fujifilm. As good as the Fujifilm is, by the way, you know, it doesn't make any sense. Now, the other thing that he was talking about was the comparison with the OMD EM1, the Olympus. So let's have a look at the Olympus. Okay, now I've got a lot of information here, so just bear with me a second. Again, we've got the same Fujifilm lenses, and I've worked out the field of view equivalence, and I've worked out the field of view equivalence for the lenses that he picked. Now notice, a lot of these are Panasonic Leica lenses, okay? He's deliberately picked these because Panasonic Leica are incredibly expensive lenses, okay? Anyway, let's have a look. They are kind of equivalent, but the nice thing about the Micro Four Thirds system is you don't have to pick, you know, you don't have to pick Panasonic all the time. You don't have to pick Olympus. You could just pick whichever one you feel like buying. So according to his mathematics, you know, it's the favor is slightly the price is slightly in favor of the Fujifilm over here, which is interesting. Right now, I've made 3 specific changes, and I'm not scrimping here. These lenses are good lenses, right? The 45mm f1.2 Pro lens is very, very highly recommended, and just have a look at the price. Let me just scroll this way a little bit. Okay, $1,199 for that versus $1,597. Okay, the Olympus 60mm macro, $349, and overall, look, you get to $10,888.99, and the price difference is, let's work it out. So let's have a look. 12,940 minus 10,888.99 is $2,051. $2,051 difference between APS-C and Micro Four Thirds. Granted, with APS-C, you're going to get better dynamic range, nicer color tonality, better resolution, and lower noise. But the Olympus has its advantages as well. You know, you've got a much better stabilization system in the Olympus. It's like the best in the world. You've got like a much more smaller compact size, and the weather sealing for the OMD is way better than the weather sealing here. And it's not like it misses out that much. A lot of people like to knock Micro Four Thirds. They have their place. You know, they have their place. They're compact, they're rugged, they're good. There's nothing wrong with them, you know. It's just, you know, different tools for different jobs, basically. So there we are. So we've debunked the myth that the Fujifilm X-T3 is better value than full frame, and we've debunked the myth that it's better value than the Olympus OMD system, right? Let's now look at his pièce de résistance, the GFX 50R versus the Sony A7R3. So this is what he had at first. So he had pick the 50R, nice camera. In fact, I'll be honest with you here. Had I not bought the A7R3 when it was launched, right? Because I didn't know this thing was going to be released, I would have probably waited and bought this one. I'll be honest with you. I like the GFXR. However, you know, when the time comes, when they come up with a GFX 100R, be that in 3 years, 4 years, whenever, I'll get that one. For now, I'm happy with the Sony, you know. If you compare the two, yeah, this one has 51.4 megapixels versus 42.4 here. There is a difference. It's a slight difference, but there is one, okay? In fact, it's 9 megapixels extra, which is 21%. You obviously need a perfect lens to resolve that, but you know, let's be real here. You know, the difference is real, but it's very, very minute. And for me personally, right now, it wouldn't make too much of a difference. If I wanted to go medium format, I want a big difference, just like there is a big difference back in the olden days when you had, you know, 35mm film versus medium format film, where you had like 4 times the resolution. That's the kind of difference that I want with digital as well, right? I'll settle for 100 megapixels, even though that's basically just over double this one. You know, I think that would be at about the 100 megapixel limit. That's what I would call a significant difference. What we have between this and this, yeah, it's there, but it's very subtle, let's face it. Okay, so I've also applied a field of view equivalence here. So the 100 to 200 f5.6. Yeah, he didn't mention this, did he, in his video? Anyway, this is the equivalent of 79 to 158mm f4.4. The 45mm f2.8 is the equivalent of 36mm f2.2, and the 110mm f2. This lens is a friggin' beauty, I have to say. Anyway, it's the equivalent of an 86.9mm f1.6. Okay, so he compared it to, so that's a zoom. So you got 1 zoom and 2 primes. Here he's got 2 zooms and 1 prime. I don't know what to say at this point. He's a friggin' idiot, right? You have to compare like with like, okay? All right, but khalas, let's just have a look. Let's see how we're going to compare it. Okay, so 79 to 158. You actually have a much better focal length range on this particular lens over here. Okay, so, you know, you have a wider focal length and you've got a more telefocal length. So, you know, you've got advantages going for this one. And look at the price. So now this is even more interesting. If you have a look at his video, he basically got the price for the 135. He said it's I forgot what I wrote down here. He wrote on his video it was 2,200, but when he was comparing it with the XT3, he said it was 1,898, and he put the more expensive price here. So I've actually adjusted it, and as you can see, now there's a $1,006 difference. So actually, even with his own comparison, there's a price difference, and a significant price difference at that. And he was trying to skew it in favor of the Fuji. But let's have a look. Let's just go with what you wrote down. f2.8 lets in 2 stops more light than f5.6. 2 stops. Now couple that with the Sony a7R III stabilization. You're going to have much cleaner low light results with this lens than with this lens. Okay, that's a fact that is undeniable. Okay, f4.4. Let's have a look at the next one. 36mm f2.2. That's what we're going to try and go for. And he put this zoom in. Now these G Master zoom lenses are expensive. Okay, I don't know why you would put that prime up against this zoom lens. It literally makes no sense. Why? Okay, but he did, you know. And of course this zoom lens is more expensive than that prime. You would expect that. That's a 45mm. Okay, and then finally, now this comparison I do sort of agree with, although it's not, you know, Sony do have a better better lens in comparison. But in terms of the top lens for the GFX versus the top lens for the Sony, yeah, I think I can see why someone would do that. However, this is an 86.9mm f1.6. Now, in case you're wondering how I work this out, basically just multiply all of these numbers by 0.79. Okay, so anyway, they're the lenses that he picked. These are the lenses that I've picked. Okay, the 70-200 f4, you know, gives you a more shallow depth of field and a sort of a bigger range than this particular lens over here for the Fuji. This one costs $2,000. This one costs $1,398. Okay. The next one, the 45mm f2.8. Now this is a 36mm 2.2. Sony don't have an equivalent. They've got a 35mm 2.8, and they've got a Zeiss Loxia 35mm f2. So depending on which one you'd want to go for, I happen to have this one, but I really do like that one. Had I not have had this one, I'd probably go for the Zeiss Loxia. But anyway, this one is only $748 versus $1,600 for that. So you can see it's like half the price. If you want to go a little bit more up market to get the Zeiss, yeah, it's still cheaper than the Fuji. And what you get is this beautiful machined metal, is mechanical lens. There's nothing which kind of compares in the modern digital era. It's kind of almost like a Leica lens, if you've ever held one of those. Okay, and then rather than the 135mm G Master, the 85 1.4 is a better match for this one. Also, again, you're getting shallower depth of field with f1.4. Also, not only do you get shallower depth of field, you do let in more light as well. f1.4 lets in more light than f2. So let's be real about this. There's advantages and disadvantages to each system. The GFX, you get better resolution, you got better color tonality, you got better dynamic range, but really ask yourself, is it all that much? Have a think about this. And the answer to that is no. The difference isn't that much. However, there's a huge price difference. Okay, with the lenses that I picked, you can either have a $3,756 saving, or you can have a $4,560 saving by basically trying to save more money. You'd have to go for the 85mm 1.8. Again, that's similar to that, not quite as good admittedly, but you know, the reviews are out there and they say it's a good lens, which means it's a good lens. And let's face it, for us hobbyists, these things are damn good enough. Do you know what I mean? Especially when you're banking this much, you know, saving this much compared to the Fuji system. You know, you got to start wondering. Now, back to what I was saying. How big is the difference? Well, let's go to DxO Mark. Let's go here. Sony a7R III versus the Hasselblad X1D 50C. Okay, so this is a dynamic range difference. Okay, the orange one is the Sony a7R III, and this also orange but slightly more red one is the Hasselblad X1D. You can see now they have this, the Fuji and the Hasselblad have the same sensor. Okay, and you can see there's overlap. Okay, and this is to do with dynamic range. So yes, the Hasselblad is slightly better up here, but then the Sony overtakes it and it has better dynamic range as the ISO goes up. That's interesting, isn't it? Okay, let's look at signal to noise ratio, which is this one. Okay, you got again the same colors, the orange and the is the Sony, the red is the thing. Now the signal to noise ratio as standard, like this, with a bigger sensor, you're going to get a better signal to noise ratio. Okay, no one is disputing this, but look at the difference. Really, can you tell? Okay, let's have a look at ISO sensitivity. Now, here the Sony completely kicks the ass of the Hasselblad. That's interesting, isn't it? Like it's basically matched here, and then it overtakes at the higher end. Tonal range, yeah, the Hasselblad is ahead. Well, it's a bigger sensor. What do you expect? But is the difference that much? No, it isn't. Color sensitivity. Come on now. I mean, are you telling me there's a massive difference here? Really? I don't think there is. I think it's very, very close. And from all the pictures that I've seen, everything just remains very, very close. Another thing that he mentioned was about how the GFX is future-proofed and that the Sony wasn't, and the fact that you know, medium format cameras aren't made for speed, video, etc. It's only made for image quality. Alright, yeah, let's just pick this apart a little bit. Future-proof, in what sense? You can say the same thing for the G Master lenses. They're future-proof because they have been designed to resolve a 100 megapixel 35mm sensor. So if they can resolve that, we are nowhere near the 100 megapixel mark for 35mm sensor currently. Therefore, G Master lenses are future-proofed. And as for speed and video, rewind back to the earliest days of digital cameras. Now, they became mainstream around 15 or so years ago. And up to that point, no one in the history of video making, say for you know, Steven Spielberg making late Raiders of the Lost Ark, nobody made video using still cameras. Nobody. And when I first got my first digital camera back in December 2004, it was a Sony DSC V3, and it did have a video function. However, it was impractical. No one was using it. But it was a nice little feature to have, you know. And then many, many, many years later, around, I think it must have been about 2010, 2011, maybe a little bit earlier. I think it was the 5D Mark II and the Nikon D90 back in around 2008. Suddenly DSLRs had video capability and filmmakers were using DSLRs to make videos. Okay? That was the turning point. Up to that point, people were saying it was impossible for a DSLR to make video, but they made it happen. And now all upper-end cameras, save for Leica, do video, all of them. Okay? And not only that, it has democratized filmmaking. If you're on a budget, like using one of these mirrorless cameras or even a DSLR to make video is a viable option, because rather than paying like $50,000-$60,000 or however much an Arri Alexa is, you've got a full frame sensor in a compact body and it shoots really good video. This is something that we need to embrace. Now, when he says medium format isn't used for video, it's because he's a dumbass. That's all he is. He doesn't understand that times move on. Yeah, currently medium format cameras don't really do video, and let me explain why. Because the sensor in the Fuji GFX, it was first introduced in March 2014. It's nearly in fact it is 5 years old. It's a 5-year-old sensor. Now, in digital terms, a 5-year-old sensor is old. Now, yes, you can make the argument that the sensor in the Sony a7R III is around 4 years old because it came out with the a7R II. However, Sony, they developed it when they stuck it in the a7R III. They developed the LSI, so that's the large scale integration, as well as being BSI, backside illuminated. And they coupled it with a much better processor. So the whole architecture was improved for the a7R III. And if you look at the technology that they put into their, 35mm cameras and compare it to crop medium format, 35mm sensors are a lot more advanced than that old 5-year-old sensor that they put in the GFX 50R. And for that reason, it's not just the sensor, it's also the processor. The Fuji can't really do that good video for now. However, when the new generation of sensors come out, the 100 megapixel and the 150 megapixel medium format sensors, rest assured, people will start making videos with those. Okay? So that's one thing that he needs to get in his head, that just because you got a medium format camera doesn't mean you can't use it for what it hasn't been traditionally used for. Now, let me explain this a little bit further. When you go to the cinema and you see a movie, the chances are it's made on something like an Arri Alexa, which is, it used to be, I think, APS-C, the sensor, but I think they've got full frame ones. But if you go to watch an IMAX film, they've got like an Arri Alexa, which has basically got two sensors side by side, so it's like double the width. They've got one of those. Technically, that's medium format digital, right? That just disproves everything that he's saying. People do use medium format for movies. In fact, all IMAX have been medium format. They just happen to be Panavision, like medium format film, the equivalent of 6x7, I think, something like that. So having a medium format camera for video is the future, in fact, right? Currently, they're not that good at video because the architecture needs to sort of like improve a little bit, but it's going to get there, rest assured. In 5-6 years, people will be making films using the latest version of the GFX. Now, just to summarize here, I'm not bashing the GFX system. I think it's great. I like the X system as well, but I have to say, it isn't the bargain that people are making out. There's a lot better, if you want to save money, there's better options out there, and Sony right now is absolutely killing the competition. Best of luck to Canon and Nikon. I do have a soft spot for Nikon, but right now, by the time they came out with the mirrorless system, I was already invested with Sony. And Sony, let's face it, they're the ones which are pushing the envelope. Not Nikon and not Canon. It's Sony that are doing it. Hence why I went for Sony. And in the future, I'll probably get a Fujifilm 100R, GFX 100R, because that style, that kind of suits me. I kind of like that style. So there we are. What can I say? Ken Wheeler. He's either an idiot, right? He either doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's a liar. He's one of the two. You have to concede he's one of the two. He either doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's a liar. Okay? Now, I remember back in the days when he had a little bit of integrity, in his early days, where he used to, do videos like, 5 secret Nikon lenses, which, you ought to buy. And those were good lenses. And he used to make videos to save people money. Now, it looks like he's making videos to make people spend money. And that's a crying shame. The guy sold out.